with Ken is gonna read. Ken, you're gonna read first, huh?
I'm gonna read.
To the lovers of the desert here assembled.
So thank you everybody for watching this instead of the hot new Netflix show, which you can start as soon as this is over. So we were trying to figure out what to read before this started, because there was this review in Plowshares, the Emerson literary magazine, and it quoted this line that I thought would sound good, and I can't find it. It might not be in my edition. So I'm gonna read you something about travel tips, because everybody wants to travel and they can't because of the plague. So when you can't do something, sometimes it makes it better to kind of like do it in the armchair fashion, and sometimes it makes it worse. We'll try to make it better. This one is called Try Not to Die. It wasn't supposed to go like this. It wasn't the plan at all. The plan was to get out of town for a few days and explore the desert, fill up the Instagram feed with abandoned gas stations and cracked asphalt 2-lanes snaking through forests of Joshua trees. Beers at a roadhouse, impulse buys at a boutique on Highway 62, a night under the stars from the safety of an Airbnb hot tub or a campfire ring. And now it's a late summer day, well over 100 degrees, not a swimming pool or outdoor cocktail bar in sight. You've been sitting in the car, the doors flung open, the burning air wrapped around you, suffocating and dense and so very dry. An empty cardboard coffee cup in the drink holder, an empty plastic water bottle crumpled under the seat. It is midday, which means in 7 or 8 hours, the ball of orange fire in the sky will finally sink behind the mountains, and the temperature will finally sink down to 95 or so. Something gave out, the car in the tank, or the city tires, or the transmission, or maybe the rear axle, snapped in two by a boulder partially buried in the sand on this godforsaken dirt road you never meant to be on at all, never consciously chose to take. The voice of the navigation robot was as sure as ever. Turn right at the gas station, even though there was little left of that particular gas station and the road itself was forlorn and untroubled by recent tire tracks. There was something you were headed for, an art exhibit on the open desert, a historic mining site, a location from a television show you remembered, a sweeping view of the National Monument. It doesn't matter now. Unless you write it down, nobody will ever know why you wound up dead on a rough, sandy track that could charitably be called a Jeep trail. So Z travel's not that good.
I'm going to start with something else, but Ken, just to answer that, the lovely reading, you it's like pretty much a weekly thing. Like people just wander off in the desert and like they're gone forever, right?
Yeah. Usually if the weather's mild, they get out of it. But those 4 months or so, which is when we get a lot of tourists because people are out of school or whatever, it's kind of each national park or monument or big state desert park or preserve will kind of claim a victim or two per season. So some of them turn up later. Like, they were trying to avoid, I don't know, a marriage or something, job trouble. Maybe they embezzled something. And then they turn up later. Oh, yeah, I just forgot to tell anyone. And sometimes they find them years later, just bones.
That's great. That's nice. I look forward to that. I want to back out since there's a lot of people here tonight who love and despise the internet, maybe in equal measure, and have had some commerce with the internet, maybe with some rue or some affection, and that maybe that can ease us into the sort of darker and more metaphysical questions How did you become a rich media mogul, and what's that like for you?
Well, I've always had a taste for caviar, and once they quit carrying it down at the Costco, it's, of course, I don't make much money, but I'm alive and I'm stuck at home like everybody else who's lucky enough to have a home. So this has been a great evening out, except for the billionaires who have to be strangled. But for kind of the rest of us, we're all in this place. And if you're in that place, you might as well be doing what you want, because you're not going to be doing anything else that's fun.
So it's been 5 years since you started the publication about, right? And
Six.
6? Oh my God.
Six.
Was there a dark moment? Was there a moment of regret? Did you decide it was a terrible idea at some point, or has it been, a sort of a nice, steady, sensible narrative progression?
It hasn't been sensible, and it hasn't been steady. And I guess with anything, about half the time, I'd rather die. It's just, we get it. It's work, but generally, I like the work. It's meaningful work. It's doing what I hoped it would do, which was to keep my head above water economically, and try not to, have a heart attack from hating what I do. Right? What else is there other than communion with God in a very deep way that'll wreck the rest of your life if you don't have it sort of in place?
In my mind, and in reading the book, you sort of chose a path that both allowed you to uncouple from the sort of darker, more graspy and increasingly foul part of the internet and journalism, and also allowed you to non-exploitatively maybe access the stuff that you find spiritually powerful.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, because you can't do that stuff in journalism unless who gets to do that? The religion reporter, right? Mm-hmm. The religion reporter who loves Bob Dylan's Christian records. That's like the one person who's allowed to have such thoughts in an entire media organization. And the rest of it's just kind of shuffling to death. So if you want to get out of that, but not say you don't have any credentials for getting out of that, right? Well, you didn't go to the monastery or the seminary or whatever. So if you're interested in a bunch of kind of esoteric stuff, it's been common going back to the Romantic era poets to start your own publications that would treat the stuff both seriously and with art and humor.
Do you have a lot of people, because the West is sort of, when we were kids, they used to say that they shook the country and all the fruits, nuts, and vegetables ended up in California.
Yeah.
Which they would say out loud, which is still true. Do you have a lot of crackpots that come to you that try and are like, hey, I got a quick buck we can make with your fine desert publication?
Not too much. No, America has lost that huckster spirit that I think is very important to newspapers and publishing in particular. That sort of fast talking bullshitter who comes into town, and next thing you know, they've got a chain of 8 dailies. And well, it's true. I mean, that's how that stuff would happen, especially in the West, where you could come and reinvent yourself because there were no credit checks. But there's lots of flighty people who are always attracted to the kind of, where you've moved from the city to more like where the flighty people move from the city, right? So some of them are, the same thing happens in Los Angeles, in the Bay Area. There's Sedona is filled with new age nuts who are still, run day spas and pay their taxes and such. So there's that kind of stuff. But I see less and less. I think maybe the reason you see less and less of the sort of classic snake oil huckster character is because now that's gone pro. You know, you don't have to bum around Joshua Tree for that. You can go right to the White House, and it's, you know, it's why bother with the small stuff? Mm-hmm. So nobody comes around, like there's no equivalent of a Clear Channel coming around and looking to buy the small, culty, semi-quarterly, you know, regional publications. They don't even know we exist.
At the same time, you're sort of on the, like by my count, like the fourth wave of mostly New Yorkers onslaughting at Southern California in the last 10 to 15 years. How bad is that going? How dreadful are we? And is the desert absorbing them or repelling them? And is it working out?
It's hard to say lately because everybody's hiding.
Right.
I know that a lot of people who had maybe a vacation cabin that they rented out as a Airbnb or something have come out here from the Bay Area or Los Angeles, or in some cases from New York. There's some artists who are out in like Wonder Valley, and they usually would just come out for the winter, but this year they stayed through the summer. But that's always been a part of the place. Joshua Tree started as kind of a bohemian naturalist, not naturalist like nudist, but we do have a nudist colony up in Landers, like one of the early ones when they called it naturalist. Mm-hmm. So people, it's not like there's salt to the earth here because we didn't have agriculture, right? So without agriculture, there's no rural base of a population. So sometimes, you know, someone who's moved out here from Echo Park a year and a half ago will be like, well, I only want to talk to people with, you know, who have long roots in the area. And that's basically the indigenous tribes, which are very sparsely populated because of the lack of water and resources long before Europeans came here. This was not a heavily populated area ever. So, and so a lot of the kind of second generation people, like the people who've had their kids here, they moved out here from like Long Beach after the Rodney King riots because they were freaked out. So it wasn't, you know, they weren't coming here with any deep generational or institutional knowledge about the desert. It's like they just want a house that looks like the one in Long Beach.
Right.
Just, you know, put up the dish on the roof. They can watch the Lakers games and KTLA, and it's like they never left.
That is sort of the problem. I do fantasize about returning to the desert. That I'm like, well, I would also be on Zoom there.
As I am living proof of, this is ultimately what my existence proves, is that at the end of the day, even if you somehow pulled off a like late career, start a little publication and not immediately go broke, you still got to do Zooms to sell books.
Just got to Zoom it sometime.
But I get to do a Zoom with you.
Ah, yeah, you're
I haven't seen you in the flesh in probably 7 or 8 years.
I know. And now you never will again because I live indoors now.
I know. But one day we're going to have to come out, like when the next pandemic comes and it only kills millennials.
I'll come west again. But I realized as I was reading your book that I heard what you just said, by the way, not letting that pass. I think I was so traumatized by like growing trauma. We like to say traumatized on East Coast a lot right now. We got it from California. We brought it back. Is that by growing up like in the desert, like that I don't want to go back. Like I was constantly afraid of dying. Like I was always like, oh my God, it's a rattlesnake. It's a spider. Like there was always like my stepmother was laying down because she got stung by a scorpion again. Like, yeah. And I feel like I was like on like such hyper vigilant desert alert all the time that I find the desert exhausting instead of peaceful.
Well, but you didn't grow up there from a young age, right?
I was, yeah.
What were you, like middle school?
Yeah, I was like old enough to know better or something.
Yeah, yeah. So the kids who grow up in the desert, it just, it's like I grew up in New Orleans. We had cockroaches this big everywhere, and I hated them, but it wasn't like it didn't shake you to the core of your being because you did not know life without them.
Right.
So the kids who grow up here, in many ways, have the same life that kids anywhere would have in America, unless they live in a vibrant urban center, in which case they're rich. But if they just live out here, it's video games and Discord chats, and also they're used to giant scorpions and centipedes under everything.
They just want to be left alone. That's not totally true, actually. They don't really just want to be left alone. The yeah, I mean when we were kids, because we didn't have the Netflix, like what you did for fun was you put water in one end of the tarantula hole, the tarantula came out the other end, and you let it crawl up and down your arm, and then you went back in. There was nothing else to do.
But my dad and his twin brother, who grew up these urchins in South Phoenix with a single parent, their dad, my grandfather. My grandfather would get these, girlfriends that he'd bring home from the bar on payday, and trying to look for a new, Mrs. Layne. And the twins, 6-7 years old, they learned how to use Gila Monsters. Now, Gila Monsters are these big lizards. You rarely see them these days. They're protected, I believe, in some places, not Arizona, I don't think. But the Gila monster, its fame is that it clamps on, and the way it gets the venom into you is by chewing in a slow, long lizard fashion. So once they'd have a new girlfriend who would be over with their dad, and this being the late 40s, early 50s, the first thing the new girlfriend would have to do was the laundry, right? So they'd do the laundry and take out the sheets and stuff, and it became their trick to attach a Gila monster to the sheets hanging off the laundry line to try to scare her off.
Good gravy. That's like something out of Jane Austen.
Sort of. If Jane Austen grew up in an irrigation ditch in South Phoenix.
The most elaborate way to mismanage a situation.
Yes.
Let me ask you this. Have you noticed, okay, this may not be true, like many things I say, have you noticed that even as the New York Times and the government are all talking about UFOs constantly now, that people aren't seeing them anymore?
I disagree.
Go on.
Well, I disagree primarily because we don't have any data to suggest that people are seeing UFOs less. What we do have is there are no more serious UFO reporting groups, nonprofits that existed from the 1940s well into the 1990s with volunteer investigators in all 50 states like MUFON had. And if you saw something, there was a number you could call. It was in the white pages. You'd look it up, MUFON, and you'd call up and they'd be like, yeah, this is Ed. Yeah, I'm just 3 blocks over. I'll be right there. And then they come over and they get a report, and they would really look into it. They'd ask about your psychological state, if you'd had any kind of like emotional impact on you. They would do follow-ups and ask, because like John Mack, the former Harvard head of psychiatry, figured out a lot of people who see these things have major life changes. Even though they don't talk about it, they don't make it a part of their life, they don't become a nut. But it will, he had case after case of it happened, and within 12 months, they'd split up with their partner, went to graduate school, whatever, became a nun, went to work for the UN volunteer programs, UNICEF or something. I mean, just real like changes of morals, changes of environmental focus, all this kind of thing. So you would have real reports. Now, if you see something, what do you do? Go to Reddit? A lot of people do. They go to Reddit. There's hundreds of thousands of people on the Reddit UFO board, and you say, oh, I saw something. And then you have 300 dumb replies: swamp gas, oh, it's probably drones, you don't know what you saw, aliens, you know, just the parade of idiocy that is the chain of descending comments. So there's nobody checking. You know, you see a UFO in your commercial pilot, there's no one to report it to. The FAA book to this day, you can look it up online, it's called the National UFO Reporting Center. As one guy who's like 80 years old in Washington State, and he's just overwhelmed. He updates his site every month or two, and it's like, I'm sorry, the webmaster left or something. And so there's no real way to back up people are seeing UFOs less. They're probably going public with it less because people make a fool out of you. And the news is dumb news. I think it's all nonsense. Yeah, it's stuff that's been recycled. If you look back here, I'm sad to say I have like hundreds of UFO books and occult books and so forth, tracing the history of these movements. And everything that's going on now seems to be what was going on then. It's just that nobody really seriously talks about it. And then now and then you get one of these weird groups that starts up, like the group feeding all the stuff to the New York Times.
Yeah.
You know, oh, we found some meta materials. What are you talking about? Where is it? It never shows up. It's all BS.
I think we should get a grant, and then we can do this ourselves.
Well, we can call Harry Reid. Harry Reid got the funding for this latest little program, but of course he gave it to his eccentric billionaire hotel friend, not the president, this guy in Nevada, Robert Bigelow. And said, here, you're trying to build space hotels and you love UFOs, you run the project. And he ran it like he ran everything, which is bring me some aliens, they don't bring him aliens, and he gets bored of it and moves on.
I mean, I get it.
You're gonna get us the grant?
Yeah, I'll work on it.
I'll do it. I'll do the late night commercials.
Ooh.
Have you been deeply affected by a terrible experience with weird things in the sky? Our helpful counselors are waiting right now.
That actually does sound like a nice third act. Should we all be eco-terrorists?
I mean, to each person's taste, I think so. One person's eco-terrorist is another person's community gardener who gets a co-op going that gets people out in the sun doing something with plants and food for a couple hours a day and feeds, you know, low-income households that aren't getting fresh vegetables because they're in a food desert. I think it's good to be an eco-fascist in a democratic way, of course.
Friendly way.
Yeah.
Related to that, I think you have a somewhat honest, some caveats to it, but I think that you have a slightly, and it may have been slightly compromised in the recent year or so, a healthy prognosis for the future of the desert, or at least the Mojave. Like, I think you feel like it's sort of going to be okay for the next couple decades. What's your desert prognosis?
My desert prognosis is positive. In the West, most of this land is public land, one way or the other. You know, it's public land, even if it's Edwards Air Force Base, where Chuck Yeager, you know, did all this stuff. You think of a military base, and somebody said this from Center for Biological Diversity, Brendan Cummings, their conservation director, and a thing we did for Giving Tuesday. He said those military bases, they do their bombing and their runways and whatever, just in a little portion of it. And almost all the rest of it is buffer to keep prying eyes and people out, but also insulation from the noise and the For instance, there's federal land that connects Area 51 with Edwards Air Force Base of, I don't know, 40 miles wide or something. That's it's the National Supersonic Jet Corridor for testing of supersonic jets back and forth between Groom Lake and Edwards, because they need the space, they need to be loud, and if they crash, they don't want anybody picking through the stuff and taking it to China, because that happens. But something crashes, some rare test thing, and there are freelancers around who go raid the stuff, and there's people who will buy it. Maybe you get the motherboard off the new Lockheed stealth project or something. So that land is also conservation land, and all the military has been really good in the last decade with working with local land trusts, building wildlife linkages, and putting money into local land trusts. I mean, they've become these really good partners. And if you live in a base town, the base is a big part of everybody's lives, the economy, people work there. It doesn't matter what you think about the military or whatever. It's part of where you live, often a big part of it. Mm-hmm. So Bureau of Land Management lands, national parks and national monuments, which regardless of what happens are growing a little bit. For instance, new California Desert Protection Act passed, signed by Dumbo, 2008, had stuff in there for everybody. It was conservation bills that put money into whatever, ducks and riverways, and because environmental stuff is popular with everybody all the time. Doesn't matter how you vote. It's like 90% of people support national parks. You don't get numbers like that for anything else. So it's good overall. It's going to be hard on species as things get hotter the next 50 years or so before what's Elon's and Grimes's baby name, X24 THX.
You're doing better than me.
Whatever it is. When he, puts the umbrella around the sun and the temperatures start rapidly declining again, it'll be all right. But in the meantime, all these species need to get from place to place because there's less of everything, less spring vegetation when you have mega droughts, less water in the springs where bighorn sheep, for instance, will travel immense distances because they know there's water at the end there. So overall, it's good. It's also a very big carbon sink. A lot of people think the desert doesn't have a lot of stuff alive. It does. A lot of it you don't see. It's the cryptobiotic crust. It's the kind of micro biology that holds the ground together. And the easiest way to illustrate it is you go to the desert and there's a dirt road. What's the difference between the dirt road and the ground on either side? Well, the dirt road is just loose sand, and beer bottles and cigarette butts and vapes and whatever. And then the ground on both sides is filled with living things, even though it's mostly just low bushes or skinny creosote or whatever that have a buffer around them. It's all held together with that cryptobiotic crust. So if you ever see a mountain biker, the grown people on bicycles, what's that about? So they're driving, riding around. They think it's so fun. The dudes, especially, they got their helmets and their suits and everything. And they love like trailblazing. And it destroys the desert. We got a preserve here in Joshua Tree that I'm watching huge sections of it revert to sand because these dumbos are going off trail on their mountain bikes. But that cryptobiotic crust is as important a carbon sink as conifer forest or the Amazon.
Yeah, that's fucked. Stay on the trail, people.
Yeah, I know.
We should take questions in this chat. Please start weighing in the chat, and Ken will answer literally anything. While we wait for some, maybe. What else do I have on this list? Who wrote this? What do you miss most about being part of the East Coast liberal racist media elite?
Oh, well, the length of their name, of course, and I don't miss it because I think a lot of people, this, the truth.
Uh-oh.
This is banal truth. Uh, no, yeah, we're not getting into that. The whole time we worked together at Sployd, the whole time we worked together at the All, the whole time that I worked at Gawker, Wonkette, all these other things, when you went off to the Observer and your other adventures before you ended up at the peak of the journalism profession, a hero to all, except colleagues, of course. Yes. The whole time, all of that, where was I?
Where the fuck were you?
I was in the desert.
You were?
I was, when we first started working together at Sployd, I was in northern Nevada. And then from 2008 until present day, other than you must be looking at the questions.
There's some good ones coming in. Yeah.
Now you're not laughing at what I'm saying.
I'm not. No, sir.
So.
No, that's true. You were. I mean, like, yes, like many. Sometimes I was away too, but you were in the American hinterlands.
Yeah, and in that way, I think I got the best of it, because I'd get to come out to New York for a week or two, and the handful of people who, you know, thought they actually wanted to be around me in person would like take me out for drinks and dinners and stuff. I know. You had a party for me once. It was so nice.
Yeah,
nice. Once, of course. And then I got to go home. So I only got to see you all at your best when there was some fun novelty around for a week, and then he went home. And I think that makes me not have anything to miss, because it was never 365 days a year. It was out here and, you know, go. It's the secret to any relationship. I think whether it's romantic or platonic or work related, whatever it is you don't want to see the people too much. You know, you want to see them now and then under good circumstances, and then you'll have friends for life.
Living in New York is for suckers. Rusty is pointing out the same in the chat, who has lived outside very happily for much time. I got a good question in the chat, I think by DM, and I'll just read it verbatim. What are Ken's thoughts on his previous colleague finding a notable treasure in the forest? Perhaps not all of us know this story, so we might have to explain this.
The what?
Do you know about the Jack Stuff situation? Is that how you say his name? So the Fen treasure, I have to Google this because the Fen treasure was recently found by a former Wonkette employee. The treasure was notably searched for.
The what?
Oh my God, how do you not know this? Where have you been?
I've been on book publicity for 2 weeks.
Okay, well, your former colleague is apparently
a former colleague. You talking about the guy who made all that trouble?
I decline to answer. That does not narrow it down either, sir. But yes. So we will discuss this at a later date. But you should Google forest fens.
Oh, God, that guy's been nothing but bad news for me. I don't want to hear about that guy.
Anyways,
I almost lost my business because of that guy. You know that?
I remember that. That was a bad time.
I mean, you know, my fault. I was the editor. You know, yeah, it was my fault. Because what nobody remembers is this stupid game of chicken we used to have to play with the outrage media in those days. It was, no matter what you did, like the Michelle Bachmann Tea Party people would try to get you run out of business. You know, they'd try to get Papa John's to cancel their sponsorship of banner ads on your website. It was all so stupid. And so you had to play this game of chicken. And Nick Denton, our former boss, perfected, until he did not, this game of chicken. And the game of chicken was you act like it's going to blow over. Yeah. And you got to keep acting like it's going to blow over. So you post something and it's stupid and it ought to be immediately removed and you ought to say sorry, but you don't, because that's its weakness. So you don't do it. And like our ad people at Gawker Media used to talk about this, the Gawker Media Premium. That was like you got all this attention on these sites that were hip and everybody looked at, but they came with the likelihood that your corporate brand was going to be terribly tarnished because of what some, drug-addled dingbat on the night shift posted.
I think we're going to leave that one there. Yeah, well, it's. I guess I could say that it is maybe an endorsement of subscription media models.
I think subscription media is whether you're the New York Times or you're doing a small periodical that will get you through, or a trade thing, or a Substack, or whatever it is. Yeah, it's just so much better to find your audience and say, look, could you throw just a couple dollars at it, and then I'll be able to do good work, and you'll get something good to read.
Let's look in this chat room here. Actually, Nosley has an interesting question, which relates to a little bit to me about some of your minor social media presence. Like your Instagram account is mostly pictures of Joshua trees. Yeah. Why make this book so easy to purchase right here when it is sort of hard to get your periodical?
Well, that's a media business thing. This is something typical, that, honestly. Yeah, I mean, so when we grew up in the same era, the 1980s. And in the 1980s, I think a lot of us had the perception, the misconception that all this good stuff that we loved was difficult to get because they didn't want to let the squares know about it, right? And later you find out, no, it's because they can't get distribution. That's why, a punk label say would sign with a major, which was a deal with the devil, back when people had scorn for corporate acquisitions instead of welcoming the destruction of everything they held dear. And it was the inability to get things to more people. So that's why you have so many clicks over the years that are focused around some hard to get thing. Maybe some, like the musicians in England in the 50s, when they could get American records, it was great because they didn't play them on the radio and it was a rare thing. They were imports, or they were done by the National Record Company through licensing. And so it was a treasure hunt to find this stuff. So Desert Oracle, had it been my choice, would have had national distribution and have been in Barnes and Noble and everything else from day one. But I can't make something like that that would be accepted because I tried. It was one of the last independent magazine distributors was in Brooklyn, and they closed the year after I started Desert Oracle, 2018. Was it Ubiquity Distributors? I can't remember, something like that. And then, what happened recently? Barnes and Noble, the last big book chain, they got rid of their magazine racks. They only have that one magazine rack now in most stores. So I was in Los Angeles signing books the other day, and the newsstand that had been there when I lived there long ago, the newsstand's gone. That's where you got all the movie magazines and everything. You can still get those like in Book Soup in West Hollywood, but there doesn't appear to be a media stand like that. So the only way I could get it around was by taking it in person. And so I didn't just have to have the magazine. I had to, like embody it to go sell it to people, which I've never sold anything in my life. So I had to walk into all these bookstores like, how you doing? And usually they're like, come back after we close down. But now and then somebody would see it and you'd like see a little sparkle in their eyes. And it's like, they see this doesn't look like the usual crap. So it got in like one little shop at a time. But to this day, I've only got like 30, 40 retailers total. It'd be nice to have more.
So you're ready to sell out is what I'm hearing, which is great. I hear you.
No. I just want it to be on it. Like you should be able to buy it where you could buy they still have them, right? Like the fashion magazines and the big art magazines, and that it should be where you find those places. It's not going to be in the grocery store in the checkout line. I don't want it there. It would just baffle and anger people.
You're fairly tabloid. I don't know. No, it's true that, I mean, selling out is a generational concept that will expire with our generation, I think.
I mean, I think it expired while we're still dragging around, honestly.
No, we're fools. We're foolish ideas. Roxana had an interesting question here, which was, have you changed hearts and minds of people who destroy the desert, either through conversation or publishing, or through violence and or monkey wrenching?
Oh, well, all three, as the Bible teaches us, are effective means of getting your point across. I have not done any monkey wrenching since I was a kid. I think I've done more like civil disobedience rather than night work. That's what we call it, night work.
I was like, I've never heard this phrase in my life. I'm so
well, we don't tell just anybody. It's a phrase that came out of Earth First, the journal of the radical environmental left. The periodical is probably not going to change anyone's mind. If your idea is there shouldn't be any public land, there shouldn't be any environmental concerns, there shouldn't be any care for your water supply or the air you breathe or whatever, you're probably not going to like convert somebody if that's their strong beliefs, right? The radio show, though, the radio show's on regular commercial radio, and it's our only real radio station up here. It's like adult pop or something. It's you get in the car and you don't have Sirius or whatever. That's what you get. So I think that has probably worked some people, because then you can do like voice magic. You can kind of reel them in with a story and kind of win them over. There's no reading required. I think more importantly than that, water futures.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
But you say more importantly than that, and then you got distracted by digital media things blinking and beeping.
I know. I should block all these, but let me move this over. You look at them. I had it turned off, but then I see your eyes go over there.
I can't help myself.
What are you looking at?
Right at my ring light. Don't worry.
Okay, just look right at the ring light. Look into the light. So a lot of people who come to the desert now to visit come with no particular knowledge or concern. It's not that they're for or against, it's just not on their radar, right? Like a bachelorette party comes in from K-Town, they rent a house, they party, they get a DJ, whatever. It's not like they're for or against anything. It's just that's where you go do stuff. So most of these vacation rentals, you have a stack of desert oracles. I do hope, because I hear from people, and they're people who are not like the granola enviro types. And you have a mix of things. I've got like pop culture stuff in there, a lot more historical stuff, but it's pop culture, musicians, movie references, that kind of thing. It's got folklore, it's got scary ass stories to creep you out, and it's got a little stuff to kind of remind you where you are. There's a reason it's like that. And I've been very much into this idea of disenchantment, as Max Weber described it, as this intentional, rational takeover of mass consciousness to try to smash all the magic out of it. And it worked. It's like once we had the Industrial Revolution, that more so than the Renaissance, which was a very limited elite audience, that's what sort of killed belief in religion and the old institutions, because they didn't matter anymore. Now it's a guy down at the brick factory, you had to get his approval for everything. And so this disenchantment has left a lot of people with the idea that we don't have weird stuff anymore. People don't have spiritual experiences. People don't see weird monsters and angels. And they do, but you need to get yourself in a quiet place, and the desert's quiet, and you need that open space. And, you know, ghosts don't turn up in the light. You need to be in weird kind of places. It's like Yeats says in the Celtic Twilight, you got to make your mind still like a little pond, so that the spirit world, the fair folk, you know, can make an impression on you, because otherwise they're not loud enough. They're from the dim kingdom.
So you're not starting a cult. You're helping all of us access the things we're going to need.
Yeah, I think so.
That's
yeah. And that's, you know, it's an ongoing process in the industrial and information ages. You constantly have these cycles. You had Back to the Land when we were just babies. People saying, this all sucks. And if they catch us, we got to go to Vietnam. You know, let's just make a commune out in Tennessee. And the farm is still there in Tennessee, but there's a ton in the Hudson Valley. In fact, there are utopian communities in the Hudson Valley that go back to the early 1800s. So,
oh yeah, no, listen, there's when you go in the strangest corners. I mean, Emma Goldman used to live around the corner from me up here, outside New York, and it's like, what were they doing? A lot of stuff. But I think you're right. I think that we, so much of what we've done is like stamping out like awe and quiet and, you know, just in those moments of like, whatever, of even moments of just experience. Like I don't get to have a lot of those anymore. And I think when you read through the book, like that's what you're saying is like, if you hang out the edge of this thing for long enough, you know, you're gonna, something you'll have some experience. Like you'll have an emotional experience, you'll have a spiritual experience, you'll have a cryptid experience. Like who fucking knows?
I mean, there's a very primal experience of just coming across wildlife when you never see wildlife. I mean, it's that way for me, even seeing, you know, desert wildlife fairly regularly. It's just, it has never not amazed me. You know, I can be like running out with the recycling or something. I'm supposed to run in and work on the InDesign or something. And there's a woodpecker on a Joshua tree, and I'll stand there, you know, like this is the most fantastic thing, because it is. So, look at you, little buddy, little ladderback woodpecker. You know, as we have those here, and they're just so cheerful. So the experience doesn't need to be Shirley. Nobody even remembers Shirley MacLaine now. Shirley MacLaine was a.
Of course they do. How dare you?
Never as an actress, but not as a New Age guru.
I read every one of those fucking books. They were so weird. God,
they're weird books. Yeah. She and Warren and Sedona watching UFOs. And I don't even remember why I brought up Shirley MacLaine.
Well, it's funny because all that stuff permeated. Like we got a chunk of that entered the national conversation. Like the stuff about trauma and the stuff about toxicity. Like those are like common everyday metaphors for the shitty parts of our existence, basically.
Yeah.
And that all came directly from Shirley MacLaine and those people. But what we didn't get, like we sort of got like heavy astrology instead of like deep past life regression, which was actually what people believed when we were younger.
Yeah, there was some of that. I mean, it went back to what the hell's her name? Helena Blavatsky, the Theosophists. You know, they were doing the past life stuff out of a big building in New York, very near the old All office, in fact. And it was like a spiritualist bohemian academy where they did past life regressions and that kind of thing. So it happens in waves. And I think they all feed the same impulse and the same need. And it's just that in a hyper communication, especially now, where it's our only, you know, real social kind of world, is this these things that are always on. which is, I know, is banal. It's a cliche to say, but when they are, you never have a chance to contemplate anything. Physical place that you're in is an age-old cure for that. You know, Jesus did it. Is like, I've had enough of you people. Heal, heal, heal. You know, he left town and went up to the mountains and just sits there so that he can think again and not just be a product. Which he was. He was a healer.
Our friend Richie Williams in the chat here is talking about the darker stuff like water futures markets and SpaceX and mini satellites and then Arecibo. But like, I think your sort of takeaway, it sounds like to me, is that the onslaught of bad stuff will continue, but the desert seems like sort of unruinable in many ways.
We've had an attempt that has been blocked kind of at every step of the way, but then after 2017, the feds gave in on it, and then it had to be blocked in other ways to drain an aquifer under the Mojave Desert and pump that water to Orange County for their lawns and their swimming pools, a for-profit water thing that, of course, the Orange County Water Agency said, yeah, we'll buy that water. We don't have morals. You know, LA wouldn't do it, but OC would. And it's been blocked. If you drain that aquifer, all the springs that maintain the last of the desert pupfish, the last of the bighorn herds who were down here in the hot, dry desert where they don't have the mountain flora to get in the spring like they do in the Rockies or the Eastern Sierra. Our wildlife is going to die. We're already, the wildlife in Southern California, the mountain lions in particular, they're all getting kinks in their tails because their genetic pool is too small because it can't cross the highways. You know, there was one hit by the car by the Getty Center in LA recently, and it had the kink in the tail. And there's like the wildlife cameras. They have their fan accounts on Twitter and whatever. And so the water is essential. We're getting better at using water because there's less of it. We have a lot more people using water in California now than we did when we had much bigger snowpacks and much less, these things that look like they're going into mega droughts. So yeah, the desert will be all right because it will correct itself in time. Species are going to move north, plants included. You know, the Joshua trees are moving into the higher desert, and they're doing worse in the kind of mid-range elevations. Not enough water, and they need a little snow every year too. So there'll be losses, but if you have the land, if you have the wildlife linkages, if you can get to what used to be a very radical idea that you can serve 50% of your land, then we'll survive it and we'll hopefully come out without a complete biological collapse that affects everything from crops to breathable air to the mega methane releases. So I don't know, maybe we'll all be wearing space helmets look, we're wearing them now. There's a reason why everybody has space helmets on the science fiction books.
Oh yeah. I mean, what I'm basically hearing you say is that there's room for all of us to move in. So that's good. That's a happy ending. We're all coming over.
To here?
No, we're coming over.
Any of you. No. Here's the nice thing. You can't buy and develop this land. This land is public land. You can abuse it as public land. You can put industrial scale solar facilities on it, which is a very bad implementation of renewables because it destroys pristine habitat to do so. So you never do that. There's a big ugly one on the highway in Vegas, between LA and Vegas, Ivanpah solar facility. It's like the eye of Sauron, guys looking at you. And it's bad. It's bad for the environment. It's a stupid plant. Solar ought to be on rooftops and close to the people who use it because you lose a lot of electricity in the lines too. So you can
all move there.
You cannot move here.
Yes, we're coming over. Maris is going to be the first one over. We're all coming over.
I mean, look, you could certainly make the high desert where there's private property, high density. Palm Springs in the low desert is becoming high density.
Sure, fucking.
So you could do that, but it's not going to fill in, you know, between here and Vegas as in our youth in California, places you saw, knew, and drove through, you watched over the years fill in. They're out of land. Right. So
we can build taller and all live there together. Okay, great.
Yeah. We'll have a co-op.
I can't believe people came to this. This was great.
This was great. I wish I could see all the people in the
desert freaks. Wonderful desert weirdos.
I only saw, oh, there's a little arrow here. There's a bunch more people. There's Roxana. There's Andrew. There's
many of these are fake names, don't forget.
Yeah, like John Shankman, obviously fake.
It's completely fake.
Kate, Greg, Philip. Thank you, everybody, for coming to this. Corey and I do a video Zoom every, 12 years?
Yes, the next one will be in space helmets.
Yes.
But it'll be nude.
2022.
That was bad. I don't know.
So we'll see you. And did I miss a good joke?
No.
Oh.
Never.
Don't chat me. So yeah, this is a book. It's a good little.
It was a nice book to read. I enjoyed reading it. Thank you for letting me read it.
It's not like a novel.
You could buy it from your local independent bookseller.
Yeah, you can. And if you're not
McNally,
yeah, you can.
I'm a capitalist now.
You can get it through their online website.
He has illustrations.
Yeah,
it's true.
Yeah, that's an intaglio.
Thank you, Ken and Corey and everyone in the audience. And yeah, buy that book. Thank you.
Thank you so much for hosting us. I wish we could do it in the real bookstore.
Everyone stay safe out there.
Yes. And after we're safe, maybe we'll have a real bookstore event. We'll get Corey to come to New York again. I wonder if he knows how to get there.
Everyone respect your boundaries.
Yeah, lots of boundaries there.
Others.
Corey, thank you so much for doing this.
Bye, old friend. I'll see you in 12 years.
Okay, bye. Thank you. Goodbye, everyone.